Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's me Anarghya and today's video is going to be about The Silent Patient by michaelides. So in this video I'll be giving you like a very brief summary and we'll basically discuss the ending and my thoughts about the book. So let's get started without any further ado. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Okay, let's get started. So basically for the story, the story starts with our main character Theo, who is a psychotherapist. He's started working at a new mental hospital where he meets this girl named Alicia, who's a patient. And basically, Alicia is there because she murdered her husband for no reason, although everyone said, and it literally seemed like they had the perfect marriage, so there was literally no reason for her to kill him, but she is there because she killed him, and furthermore for no reason. And even when she was in court, she just stopped speaking altogether. Like, she didn't speak for anyone, she didn't speak for herself, she didn't even defend herself in the court or anything like that. So basically she's there for her mental disorders, and she hasn't spoken since a word since that whole thing happened. And basically, Theo is very determined to get her to speak, and everyone tells him to calm down, and it's like, you won't be able to do that, she's been like this for years and everything. But he's very determined, and he insists on the higher authorities to let him treat the patient. Now basically the story goes on and we jump between different timelines, and that is one thing I really like about this book, like the way it jumps between timelines. And it's one thing to have a good story, and it's a completely different thing to be able to narrate it so nicely. And I think the narration is like very good, it's very top notch. So yeah, we jump in between different timelines, and we basically see, as the story proceeds, we get to know Theo's processing with Alicia, what process is going on over there. We get to know about Theo's past and why he's so determined with his patients, and we also get to know about Alicia's past through her diary. Basically we get to see basic snippets of her life before the murder actually happened. So we get to know about her relationship with Gabriel at that time as well. And basically what happens is, Theo gets very obsessive with his case with Alicia. He starts to intervene in her personal life, he gets in touch with her relatives and everyone. Basically he crosses a lot of boundaries while this whole process is going on, and that is because he feels somehow connected to the whole thing that is going on. And when you're reading this book, obviously there's a lot of different suspects, and therefore whenever you see any one side of the story, like, no one seems straightforward, everyone seems suspicious. So like, you have to doubt everyone you see. Now basically, if this is like the part until here is like the no spoiler part, now from now on it will have all the spoilers. So if you want to read this book, if it interested you so far, you can stop the video right here, because from now on I'll go into the spoilers. So basically when we jump into the second half of the book, what happens is that we see these different suspects, and we see and we suspect each one of them, obviously. And basically what starts happening is, so we have these different scenarios. One is Theo and his personal life, one is his life with Alicia, like the time he spends with Alicia. Then we have the time of Alicia when we read in her past diaries. Basically there's three scenarios going on. So in scenario number one, the story that's going on with Theo is that he has his very great marriage with his wife Kathy, who is an actress. No, but she does something like that, I don't remember what she was, but yeah, something like that. So basically she is very nice and they have a pretty good marriage, but for some reason he sees her emails and he finds out that she's cheating on him, and that really 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 breaks him. And although he visits his older therapist, and she tells him that it's best for you to let go, this is you repeating your childhood wounds all over again, he doesn't let go of Kathy, and he pretends to not see the emails, and he pretends like nothing happened, and he tries to carry out life just the way it was, but it doesn't carry out that way, obviously. So in the hospital, obviously Alicia is not talking at all, but somehow through digging her past and doing all that research on her, putting in all the extra effort, Theo basically convinces her to show little signs, and she starts doing a little bit of nods and blinks and stares and some specific sort of like passive communication that starts over there. And in Alicia's diary we see that how her marriage life with Gabriel was actually pretty normal. It was pretty nice and somewhat normal as well, right? So we see that all these three scenarios are going on, and now Theo is so determined to know who the guy is whom his wife is cheating with on him. So he tries to find out, and little by little he gets to know who he is and everything like that. But that is like pretty much on the side. Our main focus over here is Alicia's current relations, and Theo digs through all her relationships. He finds out her cousin, her guy best friend who was jealous of her husband's brother, and her aunt, and there's a lot of like different relationships we go through, and everyone seems a suspect at first, and you're suspecting everyone, but obviously none of them would have been the murderer or somewhat related to it. So yeah, so basically when we go through Alicia's diary, what happens there is that she has a basic pretty simple life and everything, and it's going on and on and on, and we see that she has some troubled relationships with her closest family members, and there's a problematic her husband's brother is pretty problematic. He sort of has a soft corner for Alicia in not a good way, and her best friend, who used to be her best friend, whom she didn't really think was her best friend, he was also jealous of her husband Gabriel, and she even had a neighbor whom she didn't really like, but she had to communicate with, and that was also like going on. So basically Theo goes and he suspects all of these people of murdering or whatever, being connected to the scene somehow. Then when we read through Alicia's diary, basically this whole procedure goes on, and it reaches to a point where Alicia in the hospital, she starts like hitting other people, and a lot of scenes basically start happening to a point where they have to close the case. And that's when Theo basically tells her that this is the last time we are meeting. If you want to say something, this is your last chance. And that's when Alicia gives him her diary, and Theo goes through it all. So basically now we'll cover the whole diary aspect. So basically what happens in the diary furthermore is that with that all of situations going on in Alicia's life, it was like she was dealing with them and she was carrying on a pretty normal life until one day she saw someone on the road. It was some guy. She basically saw him through her window. She saw that there was a guy who was like looking at the house or just passing through the neighborhood. She didn't think much of it, but then she kept seeing the guy repeatedly, and she couldn't, because of the distance that they had, she couldn't make out the face or the features of the guy, but she knew it was someone, and she knew it was the same person who repeatedly came to her house every day and would just be there and stay there. And now she tried talking about it to Gabriel, her husband, but he didn't seem to make much of it, because of her troublesome past. Alicia already had psychotic episodes, and she was diagnosed with, I guess, bipolar disorder or borderline personality, like one of these. So basically he kept telling her to calm down and it's not a big deal and everything like that, and basically the whole situation goes on. But she's pretty determined that this person is real, and she's not faking it, she's not imagining it. That person actually exists, and no one is believing her. She even tells her neighbor about it, and then basically Theo reads through this diary. So basically where the diary ends is there's this last diary entry where she basically says that she saw that man coming into her house, that man broke into her house, and that is where it ends. So basically the diary leaves you in a cliffhanger, so you don't know what's going on. So meanwhile this all is going on, Theo is having to pretend his life with Kathy, and he's faking it, everything that's going on, and he's basically now getting curious more and more to find out who the guy is that she's cheating with. So in the next unofficial meeting, Theo basically asks Alicia to speak, and he's like, you left the story on a cliffhanger, now I need you to speak, and I need you to be able to tell me what happened after that, and why don't you ever talk about that whole incident, what happened at the night of the murder, and what was going on. Due to that whole situation, basically Alicia actually starts talking, and then he gets to have actual sessions with her, and he does, and basically she starts talking, and little by little she goes where that whole stalker thing happened. So yeah, and she basically gets to the point where she tells him about what happened at the night of the murder. She tells him that the stalker guy came in, he locked her up, he chained her, or like tied her up, and she explains this whole scenario where,
she was waiting for her husband to come back, and he came back later than usual, and then when he came in, that stalker guy basically shooted him like 5 or 6 times, and he died.
Gabriel died, and that was it. And now Theo was like very not satisfied with the story. He was still questioning why was she lying to him after all that is going on. Like, he knew she was lying, and so basically that is where the session ends, and he thinks about how to get her to speak the truth about what happened, but he doesn't tell it to her on face. Right now, after that situation, basically we have this scene where basically Alicia is somehow drugged by someone, and she is taken to the hospital. Like, at first it was presumed that she took an overdose and she tried a suicide attempt, but later on Theo found out that she had been drugged by someone, because she had these marks on her arm and everything like that. So basically the story starts coming to an end, and we go back to Theo's perspective of his life, and we see that he finds out who that guy is whom his wife is cheating on with, and he goes to his house. He follows the guy after he sees them together, and he finds out where he lives, and whatever is going on. And this is the point where you actually start to guess what the plot twist can actually be, and it seems a little off point, but that's the only possible explanation at this point. And if you've guessed it by now, yeah, you guessed it right. So basically this whole thing goes on, and Theo goes on about describing like how he would randomly visit that guy's house, and he thought that the guy would be single, but the guy actually had a wife. And the wife, he assumed that the wife didn't even know that he was like going behind her, that her husband was going behind her back and doing all this stuff with his wife. So he basically decided to keep a close eye on the guy's house, and he would see his wife, and he even thought that she might be seeing him, but he thought that for her, he was a complete stranger, so it wouldn't matter. He even broke into her house one day. So now at this point, he says that when he broke into her house and she sort of saw him, he says that that's how he met Alicia Berenson for the first time, and the rest is history. Yes, this was the plot twist. And although for the timing when I found this out, like, the story isn't finished here, but for the timing when I found out, I was pretty shocked, and it pretty much like felt nice. But that feeling didn't last long. Like, I have read a lot of suspense thrillers where the plot twist wasn't this big, but it lasted with me for days, for months. And there's even a few books like where I can still feel that inside me if I think about it right now. But I don't know why, but I literally finished this yesterday morning, and I went about my day pretty normal. Like, I didn't really think about it much. Basically, the whole situation that we were talking about, the past, present, wasn't really clear. When we were talking about Theo's situation, we thought that it was going on in the present. We thought that we were talking simultaneously about his day when, he came back from hospital, and then he went, like, his things would happen with Kathy, and then in the morning he would go to the hospital again, and he'd come back. But the part where we were talking about his personal life, that was actually a little bit in the past. Alicia had basically found out, she had realized that this guy Theo is actually the stalker guy, and no one believed her. But it was like, because when Theo would come to her house, Theo would be in a mask, and he would not show off his features, so she could never ever describe his appearance to anyone, and no one already believed her. So yeah. And basically, but she could see his eyes, she could see his, she had spoken to him, and she had had some encounters with him. And at the end possible moment, she basically found out that okay, maybe this is the stalker guy, Theo is the stalker guy. And then basically, when she told him about that whole incident, she lied on purpose to him to see his reaction. And that's when she saw fear in Theo's eyes for the first time, and that was basically a confirmation, just telling her that yes, Theo was the stalker guy. And now Theo was the one who drugged her, because obviously now she had found out. And then, she basically wrote this in her diary for the one last time before she knew she was gonna die. And she went into a coma or something. Yeah, she went into a coma. But, it was like she knew she didn't have much time left, so she basically wrote it down, and she basically hid the diary into her stuff, like it was in one of the frames or something of her paintings. So yeah, that's how she hid it. In the murder situation, what actually happened was that Theo was just there to tell Alicia about his cheating husband. He basically, that whole wired thing happened and Gabriel coming to home thing happened. But Theo didn't shoot Gabriel. He just told her, she just basically gaslit Theo, and he basically like gave him a situation to ask him, like, if I had to choose between you and Alicia, whom do you think should die? And Alicia said to him that he's gonna kill us both, so don't worry about it, darling, don't stress over it. And at the end possible moment, Gabriel says that he wants to live, and he basically like chose his life over Alicia's, and that was sort of like heartbreaking to Alicia. And that's when Theo tells Alicia that this guy is cheating on you with my wife, and we are both in the situation where we don't know what to do about it. And he basically left the gun over there. He didn't shoot anyone, and he basically smiled to Alicia and he left. But Alicia, due to her already mentally sick mind, she picked up the gun, and due to all her rage of her some past issues, some past trauma with her dad, she picked up the gun and she shot Gabriel at that very point. That is what happened. Like, she actually killed Gabriel, but she can't give this explanation to anyone. So she basically writes this all down into her diary, and she closes it, and this diary is hidden away, and no one finds it until very late in time when Theo is basically moved on with his life. So this one random day, that policeman who was in charge came in, and he basically dropped the bomb saying that he found the diary. And although the situation was obviously pretty misfortunate for Theo, he somewhat felt relieved that finally it's out, and he doesn't have to fake this life anymore. He doesn't have to be untrue to himself anymore, and he can finally like be free at least. And that's the ending scene of the book. So through this entire book, like, it was pretty obvious it was a bestseller, and it won't have a very simple plot twist. And all the members were coming up with the suspects and everything. I knew that it won't be any of them. Obviously, that was pretty obvious, although they were trying to put on the suspicion on them, but it seemed sort of like forced, because it was pretty obvious that none of them was gonna be the killer at the end, and they all just seemed pretty forced for some reason. And Theo, however, one thing was that Theo had always been a red flag since the beginning of the book, and that is something that I somewhat on a subconscious level did figure out, but I didn't really like think that much about it, because the fact that this book is somewhat of a page turner, it feels a little slow at first, but it gets its pace very quickly. And that's why no one would have really suspected him because he's the narrator. So we don't know that the narrator is unreliable. If the narrator of the story would have been Alicia, that would have been a whole different case. But the fact that the narrator of the story was Theo, no one knew that he would be this unreliable. However, he was a red flag since the beginning. And if I would have read this book in chunks, in like a little parts of it daily, and I would have taken like a week to finish it, it would have been a little more than obvious that Theo was somewhat in the gray area. Because like right from the start, his whole description of Alicia, him being so obsessive over that whole case, him not knowing boundaries, him not leaving Kathy even after everything that's going on, like, I somewhat try to make sense of it in a practical way, and I tried to like keep it aside, but my mind was bugging the whole time, like, why is Theo even doing that? Like, how is he a psychotherapist, and how does he not have this basic human sense? Like, why is he acting like Joe Goldberg when he's supposed to be a psychotherapist. It was just the fact that, you know, Theo was so curious about Alicia and he was trying to uncover the truth for some reason, and he was opposing everyone who was trying to keep the situation under covers for their own benefits, was the only reason why it didn't strike me. Otherwise, it would have been pretty obvious that, you know, Theo is somewhat the whole villain in the story. But still, it just didn't click so naturally. It just didn't feel so natural. Although it was pretty practical too. It was perfect, but for some reason it just didn't kick in the way it should have been. Like, a plot twist so huge shouldn't have felt so shallow for some reason. I don't know. I have very mixed feelings about this book. When I newly finish a book, I always like it very much. It's actually a week or two after I finish the book when I actually realize whether I actually like it or not. You know, like, I can't conclude whether I like a book or not after reading it. I need a week or two to process it. If I still like it after that period, that's when I know if I actually like the book or not. Because every book that I read, I have a positive mindset about that. So yeah, that was it for the video. I hope you liked this video. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you have read the book, you can share your views with me down in the comments below. And if you want any other video explanations or reviews, you can also request them down in the comments. Until next time, bye bye, subscribe and have fun.